Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'm going to show you guys how to do a transition from a third person to a first person. And then also you can transition back out to third person. So this comes from a request in the comments, which I really appreciate you asking about that. And I tested this out, got it working. I haven't fully tested this. There are maybe some issues that you might run into, but I can't really think of anything right now. I will go through everything and try to explain everything, and hopefully, this will at least get you pointed in the right direction. So, without further ado, let's get started. I'm gonna drag this over here, and this is the same project that I had from the previous video. So we have our first person character here that we had already set up. But what we're gonna do is actually go into our content drawer here and go back to the third person folder here, and we're going to copy another one of these over to our character or to our characters folder. So I'm just going to copy this over here. And then I'm going to rename this BP dual camera character. And then don't forget to replace that character here so that we are actually going to be using that when we hit play. Okay, so now we're just back to just our completely clean third person character. So let's open that up. And I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to do this. I will start with kind of a really easy method, and then I'll show you a little bit more advanced method, which will be a little bit smoother, I think. So for the really easy method, let's add another camera here. So just type camera, add that, and let's call this first person camera. And similar to what we were doing in our previous video, we're just going to attach that to the mesh. And then we're actually going to parent that to the head. And then zero these out. Actually, we can leave the rotation how it is. And we just need to rotate it like that. And then bring it forward. I think I had this at 12. Let's go with that. Okay. So this is not going to do anything, of course. We're still going to be in our third person view here. But what it's going to do is, of course, give us another camera there so that we can we can program in some functionality to switch to that camera. The first thing, let's go into our inputs and let's create a new input for this. So duplicate run, and we'll call this camera switch. And we don't need to do anything in there. Go back to our input actions and let's add a new mapping. Camera switch. And again, you can make this anything you want. I'm just going to make it X. Save that. And then let's call IA camera switch. Okay. And let's see. So what we want to do here is we want to essentially switch from using this camera when we press that button to use the other camera, our first person camera. So this is pretty easy. We can just drag our first person camera out. And what we want to do is drag out of here and call set active. And let's see, I think let's try this out of start. Again, I always forget which is which. So when we switch to this, we want this to be new active. And then we want to get our follow camera, drag that out, and we can actually just duplicate this. I'm just going to hit Control D to duplicate, and that will now be not active. So before we go any further, let's just try that just to test that. Okay, so now if I hit X, then we go into, well, all we do is just switch to that other camera. Now, you'll probably remember from the previous tutorial that there were a couple of things that we needed to do to kind of fix the way it looked there. So what we can do is, out of our first-person camera here, we can call set use control pawn rotation. And if you remember last time, all we did was we just set that in here, pawn rotation. And so if you don't know, this is a really helpful thing. You can typically call things that you would have over here in your details. You can typically call them if you drag out of here and search for them in here. So that's all we want to do here. We want to set this to true because we want to use pawn control rotation. And then the other thing that we did was, let's see, we set this to use controller rotation yaw. And so we need to set that to true as well. Now you'll notice that we get that from here and we can't like drag this out. To be honest, I don't know why you can't drag this out, but all you can do here is you can just right click and you can type self and then click on get a reference to self here. And this reference is essentially the same thing as dragging this out. So then from there, we can do use control rotation yaw. And we want to make sure that we do set here. Okay, so now we'll set that to true as well. And compile, and let's just test that out. So now when I hit X, there we go. Okay. So that's, again, very, very easy to do. That's just switching to that camera and then just changing a couple of these settings here. Now, if you wanted to go with this method, there's obviously you need to be able to switch back. So the easiest way to do that would just be to use a flip-flop here. Flip-flop. And on B, we essentially want to do all of this, but we want to do it, we want to kind of undo it. So we want to get this. I'm going to hit Control D. And we want to set this one to active now. And then we want to get this one, Control D. And we want to set this to not active. And then we also want to get this. And set that to false. And then we want to, I'm just going to drag out of this one so I don't have to get a duplicate of that. And use controller rotation yaw. Set that to false as well. So I did this a little backwards compared to how I did it there, but essentially all we're doing is just setting the cameras active and not active here, and just choosing which camera should be active, and then enabling and disabling the control rotation and controller rotation yaw. So let's just test that out. See if that works. So X to switch into this camera, and then X to switch back. Okay. So again, that's the easy method, I guess you could say. But what I think would be cooler is to do kind of like how I always think of Skyrim, the way that they do it, how you can like hit a button and you can kind of zoom out in like a smooth transition. So to do that is going to be a little bit more complicated, but not too crazy. So for this, we're going to use timelines. I'm going to just disconnect all of this, and we'll just kind of save that code if we ever want to switch back to that. Let me think how we are going to do this. So let's, out of started here, let's go add a timeline, and we'll call this TL. How about third to first? I don't know. I'm terrible at naming things. So if you've never used the timeline before, I will try to walk you through what's going on here. They can be a little confusing. I remember the first time I used them, I had no idea what I was doing and didn't understand how this worked. And to be honest, it took me quite a while to really kind of grasp what was going on with the timeline. But essentially, so you have a track length here. This is just the length of our timeline in seconds. So right now it's set to 5 seconds. Let's maybe do 2 seconds. And then what we want to do is we actually want to add a track here. Now there's different types of tracks. Most of the times you're going to be using a float track, which is what we're going to do here. And we can just call this, people normally call this alpha. That you can call it anything though. So I want to add 2 points on the graph here, or keys. And so I'm just going to right click and click on add key. It doesn't really matter where I add this. I can just click on and do another one, because we want to change these values to be something specific. And you'll notice here when I click on this, we have 2 different values. So we have a time and then we actually have a value. So for our first value, we want it to be at time 0 and we want the value to be 0. And again, this is probably confusing, but I'm going to try to explain this after I set this up. So our next key, we are going to want to set that at the end of the timeline. So whatever number this was, for me it's 2. If you did 1 second or 5 seconds, whatever, that's going to be the length that it's going to be the transition from going from first person to third person or third person to first person. So again, for me it's 2. And then our value is going to be 1. And this is where you might get kind of confused. So what we're doing with this timeline is we're taking a time and we're moving it over a value. And so as this moves over time, it's going to give us a number, which is our value at every point along this line here. So you can see like right here, we have a time of 0.7 seconds and it gives us a value of 0.35. And so the reason that we're doing this is because we want to use 2 numbers, 0 to 1, to transition between a length. Again, I know that might be a little confusing. It might take a little while to get used to that, but just go with me. So the other thing I'm doing here is if you highlight both of these by holding Control and selecting them, I'm just right-clicking and I'm changing this to auto from linear. You could leave it on linear if you want. Auto will just give you this a little bit smoother kind of S-curve here. Linear may actually look better, but this is just kind of the transition, what the transition looks like. So if we have it here, it's going to start out a little slower and then speed up and then kind of slow down at the end. So it kind of eases in and then eases out, whereas linear is just straight, immediate acceleration and then immediately stop. But anyway, I'm going to set that to auto for right now. Okay, so we have our timeline here. And One very important thing is we don't want to have this on play. We want to have this on play from start. Um, Make sure you don't have that on play because you're going to run into issues if you do. Essentially, it's just going to play one time, and then if you hit this again, then it's going to not play through this timeline again. So make sure you have that on play to or play from start. The next thing that we want to do is we so when we hit this initially, we're starting in third person. You could start the other way. You could start in first person, but I've just got it set up to start in third person right now. We want to move from this camera, and we want to move the actual camera into where this camera is. Now, I tried to do this a couple of different ways. This is one of those things where there are probably 25 different ways to do this. And I would actually love if anybody has any better advice on how to do this. Please, by all means, let me know. Let us all know in the comments. I love learning, and the way that I'm showing you is probably not the best way to do it, but it's a way to do it. So initially what I tried to do is I tried to get locations for these cameras. And that kind of worked, but I also ran into some issues. I'm sure it was on me. I was doing something wrong. But what I ended up doing was basically just adding something in here to help us kind of get the initial location. So one thing you can do is just type in arrow here. And an arrow is, there's actually an arrow on the character already. You can see it right here. Literally all it does, it can do a few different things. It can just give you like a direction, so it shows you which direction our character is facing, which is kind of handy, especially if you don't have a body in here. But another thing that it can be useful for is just actually getting a location of something. So in this case, we don't actually want to get the location of the camera. I mean, we do, but if it is parented to the camera like this, then when we start moving the camera, it's going to move as well. So we actually want to parent this to the camera boom. And you can see it kind of snapped back here. That is just because we need to reset the location here. So just hit reset there. So let's also rename this so we don't get this too confusing. Let's call this follow camera location. Okay. And then we want to do the same thing. We want to put an arrow where this camera is. So let's click on the mesh there and then type in arrow. Add another one there, and let's call this first person camera location. And so this is basically just like how we did with the camera here. We want to attach that to the head. And it doesn't really matter that it's pointing up because we are actually not going to worry about the rotation, but maybe just for just to kind of help visually, let's just rotate it 90. And then if you remember, our camera here is moved on the y-axis plus 12 degrees, or plus 12 units. So actually, this is kind of backwards here. Oh, no, that's right. I'm sorry. Okay, so 12 units there. Okay. So that should be good. So now our arrow is in the exact same location as the camera. Technically, I guess this would need to rotate like that. But again, the rotation is not super important. And then our follow camera is in this location back here. And the good thing about these arrows is they don't show up in the game. So when we hit play, of course, you don't see them anywhere. All right, so the next thing that we want to do is we want to now transition from the third person camera to that first person camera. I tried to do this a couple of different ways as well when I was experimenting. I tried to like only use one camera and transition it to the location here and then parent it to the head and all of that stuff. I think that that could work, but I, again, just ran into issues and it just got a little complex. So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to stay in the view of this camera as we move in. And then when we get to this location, we're going to switch to this camera. So let's see. What we want to do here is we want to use something called a lerp. And actually, I'm sorry. We want to use a lerp vector because we are going to be doing a location that we're moving to. And the location that we're moving to is going to be our follow camera. And we're going to drag out of that and we're going to set world location. And that's going to be on update there. So as this runs through the timeline, now if we did it just like this, it wouldn't actually play this timeline. I mean, it would, but it would just immediately set this. So this is where our alpha comes into play. Our alpha here is going to plug into our alpha in our lerp. And again, if you've never done this before, this might be really confusing what a lerp is. But a lerp is something that allows us to, if you remember back in our timeline, so we have these two different numbers here. We have 0 and 0, and then up here we have 2 and we have 1. Our lerp is going to allow us to move through this, and it's going to allow us to set a starting number and an end number, which is going to be our location essentially, and then it's going to move through this over this value of 0 to 1. Again, that might be really confusing, but just kind of go with me here and hopefully this will make sense as we go. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we want to, the A is going to be our start location. So that's going to be from the follow camera. So I'm going to drag that out and I'm going to do get world location. And then that can just plug right into there. And then the end location is going to be our first person camera location. So same thing, get world location. Plug that into B. And then our return value will be our new location. Okay, so let's test this out before we do anything else. Okay, so hit X, and there we go. Now, you can see that we still need to set a couple of things, but that does that transition for us at least. So what we essentially need to do now is we need to do what we did up here. We can actually just copy this code, or maybe even better yet, let's put this into a function just to make this a little cleaner. So we'll call this set FP camera active. And then let me see if I can just copy and paste this. That would be helpful. Control C. Yeah, okay. So we can just plug all this in there. And that should be all we need to do there. So now we can go back here. And what we want to do on finished make sure you put it on finished and not here, because um, with finished, this will actually wait for the timeline to play through, and then it will fire something here. Whereas if you just put something here, it will just go right through, and you don't want that. So here we want to call set FP camera active, and let's test that out. Okay, that looks perfect. All right, so we are doing pretty good. We need to now essentially do the reverse of this. Now, there's a couple of things that I would probably recommend that you do with this. If you are going to have a game that's going to have a first and a third person perspective, you don't have to do this, but I would recommend let's make a variable and just call it first person. And let's actually set to this. So drag that out, hold Alt. Let's set this when we do this to be true. This, again, it's not important. This is not required to make this work, but this is probably just a good practice to get into because there might be a reason that you need to know, like, am I in first person or third person? So what we want to do now is we kind of want to do all this over. I experimented with this trying to use the same timeline. I think you could use the same timeline and do reverse, but I kept running into issues. So what I'm going to do is just basically duplicate this timeline, Control D, and let's see, let's rename this. Oops. Let's call this TL first to third. And we can also get our flip-flop here. So this will be on B, and let's also duplicate that. So when we hit this, we will not be in first person, and we're going to do play from start again. Now, this is going to be slightly different because before we do our timeline, we actually want to set the third person camera active. That's because the way we're doing it here, so we're moving the first person into the first person view. I'm not sure if I said that right. We're moving the third person into the first person view. So after we do that, we want to set that camera active. But here, right when we press the button, we essentially want to set the third person camera active. So we kind of want to do this before the timeline starts. So let's make another function here, and we'll call it set TP camera active. And this will be what we did down here. So I'm just going to copy that, paste that in here. Okay. And now we can just call that right here. So set TP camera active. So that will run that code first. And then we want to, let's see, this is still the same. So that's fine. We need to get our lerp vector. And here we want to set the follow camera location. Sets location. We'll do world location on updates. And that will go into our return value. Okay, so we want to get our first person camera location. That will be our start. Get world's location. So that's going to go into A. And then our end location on the B is going to be our follow camera location, which is at the end of that boom. So get world's location. Plug that into B. And our alpha is going to go into alpha. And that should be it. So let's test that out. Okay, so X to move in. And then X to move out. And that's pretty much it. Okay. So there's one other thing that I can think of that we would need to do here. And that is if I start spamming X here, then you notice some problems. So yeah, now it gets kind of confused. Now I press X again, nothing happens. So the reason that that's happening is because if we just start spamming this, it's getting confused. It's like it's going between these and it's saying like, okay, I'm trying to play this, but now you want me to play this and do all this. So there's a couple of ways that we could fix this. I think the easiest way would be to drag this all out a little bit. And let's do a drag out of started and do or type do once. And so essentially, this is exactly what it says. It's just going to do this once. And once it is done, then it will not run through the skin until we have a reset condition here. And the way that we can do a reset condition is very simple. We can just make a custom event. So add custom events, and we'll call it reset camera. And we can plug this into reset there. And what we want to do here is call that, let me think. So on this one, we want to call it after this. So we'll do reset camera. Okay. This is getting a little messy here. Timelines are always interesting for trying to keep things organized here. And then down here, we want to call it unfinished as well. So reset camera. Okay, so now if I did that right, this still works. And now I'm just like spamming X, but it's going to wait until it calls that reset to actually let me do that transition. So yeah, that is pretty much it. I think this works pretty good. Again, I haven't thoroughly tested this, but you know, it does work pretty good if you are jumping in and out or whatever rotation you're in. It seems to work. So I hope that helps. There are a couple of other things that you might want to think about if you're going to do this. If you are using a character with where you're hiding the head, you'll need to think about how to hide and unhide that as you do this. So maybe like in set first person camera active, you might want to also add, you know, grab your mesh, and then you probably will have a material or something for your head that you'll need to make that invisible. And then when you do your set third person camera active, you'll want to set that visible. Another thing you could do I feel like this might be a little janky, just like zooming into your head, um, especially kind of zooming out. It might look a little weird as you're just like the camera's just coming out of your head. One thing you could do is do like a screen fade, where it just like is a very momentarily fade to black. You could do that with a widget, or I think there's actually a free uh, blueprint in the marketplace that will allow you to do a screen fade. Um, but that's just kind of a little bit of a small thing. But yeah, if anybody has any questions, let me know. Um, if you have any other ways to do this, or if you think that there are some ways that can be improved with the way I did it, please by all means let me know. And thank you again so much for watching. If you guys have any other suggestions for videos, please let me know and I will do my best to make them. All right. Have a great day, guys.